Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. I'm Anita Huberman. I'm President and CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade. And again, let's give a round, warm Surrey welcome to Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and our Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland. We begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of our Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, Katzie, Coquitlam, our Inuit, and Métis peoples. They have a profound connection to the land and water that surrounds our great city of Surrey. And in fact, in British Columbia, it is our city that has the greatest number of urban Indigenous peoples and significant economic partners in driving our economic agenda forward. Events like this simply would not happen without sponsorship support. Thank you so much to our presenting sponsor, Fortis BC. Our community sponsor, Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. Some special guests in the audience that I'd like to recognize this afternoon. Representing John Aldag, our MP for Cloverdale, Langley City, is Kyle Latchford. Kyle, thank you so much. There he is. Suk Dhaliwal, MP for Surrey Newton. Randeep Sarai, MP for Surrey Centre. Her Worship, the Mayor of Surrey, Brenda Locke. Chief Harley Chappell, Semiahmoo First Nations. City of Surrey Councillor Rob Stutt. And City of White Rock Councillor Bill Lawrence. Surrey Board of Trade, we are a not-for-profit, an independent voice of business where we support business and bring business into the city through a very diversified service portfolio, instigating change at the different levels of government, creating global business connections for local businesses, really ensuring that we're starting businesses, making that entrepreneurial spirit alive and sustainable. Thank you so much, everyone, for supporting the Surrey Board of Trade. Now I'd like to, yes, thank you very much. And so I'd like also for you to give a warm round of applause to our presenting sponsor representative. She is the Vice President of Fortis BC. Please help me welcome Andrea Kadojan.
Thank you, Anita, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrea Cadigan, Vice President of People at Fortis BC, the province's largest energy provider. Before I get started, like Anita, I too acknowledge that we're on the traditional, unceded territory of Katzie, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and other Coast Salish peoples. I'm grateful to live and work on this land and recognize that each of us have a responsibility in advancing reconciliation. I'm honored to be here as a sponsor of this event where we can get a better understanding of the federal budget. This is an important discussion on every front as affordability continues to be the center stage of conversations across many industries, especially at a time when concerns about the economy continue to rise. Certainly, we see this in the energy sector and at Fortis BC. Affordability has always been a key factor in British Columbia's energy choices, and we've seen that importance grow over time. At Fortis BC, we're progressing towards a cleaner energy future for the province while ensuring tomorrow's energy system remains cost-effective and reliable. We've worked to provide British Columbians with new choices on how they can take climate action in their homes and businesses so they can find solutions that meet their budgets and their circumstance. We've invested in a number of pilot programs for new technologies that can help families be more energy efficient, lowering their energy use and their monthly utility bill. And we continue to strengthen our energy system through capital investment in critical infrastructure that will carry the next generation of low-carbon energy to British Columbians. Challenges certainly remain, but we're confident in our progress. I'm sure our speaker today will echo a similar confidence in the pathway our federal government charted Tuesday, investing in our future while ensuring affordability for Canadians stays top of mind. First elected in 2013, our speaker previously served as Canada's Minister of International Trade, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Today, she serves as the Minister of Finance and our Deputy Prime Minister. It is my pleasure to introduce the Honourable Chrystia Freeland. Please help me welcome her.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for that warm BC welcome. And, you know, as I'm sure you all know, everyone from the rest of Canada is really jealous of everyone who is lucky enough to live in BC. And you've made that feeling worse for me today because the weather is so beautiful. On the day after the budget, so that was yesterday, I do this telephone radio interview marathon where I do radio interviews going across the country. And I sometimes hear a little bit of the radio broadcast before they interview me. And so I can tell you that yesterday it was 15 below in Winnipeg. So let's just spare a thought for our friends and family in Winnipeg. So anyway, it is so wonderful to be here. I do want to especially thank my friends Suk and Randeep, with whom I work very closely. And everyone in Surrey, rest assured, these guys are extremely effective and totally tenacious when it comes to fighting for Surrey. So I'm really glad to be here, and frankly, I had no choice. I mostly would really like to listen to your questions and try to give you some answers. And I don't have like a big prepared speech, but maybe I'll start with a couple of kind of key thoughts about where Canada is today and what we're trying to do with the budget. And first thing to say, I really liked the point about confidence and optimism. Because for sure there are challenges in the world, in Canada, in the lives of so many Canadians. But I really want to start from a point of view of optimism and recognizing the strong fundamentals our country has. Last year we had the strongest economic growth in the G7. We have added 830,000 jobs to the Canadian economy since the depth of the COVID recession. That's 126% a job recovery compared to just 114% in the United States. And their economy has been doing pretty well. So think about that. The strongest number in Canada's labor force participation is working age women. And we are now at more than 85% labor force participation of working age women. It is the highest in Canadian history. It's almost 10% higher than in the US. And a lot of it is because of early learning and childcare. So thank you, BC, for contributing. BC was the first province to sign on to the federal government program. I think that, it's had a big impact on affordability in a lot of people's lives. This is the Board of Trade, so I know that I'm in a room where labor force shortages are an issue. And having childcare means lots of great BC mums can be working in your businesses, or maybe some of you are those BC mums who are able to be entrepreneurs and leading businesses. So that's kind of, I just wanted to start from those economic fundamentals. And also really to say, like, the federal government doesn't create that strong economy. It's everybody here who does. So thank you very much. In terms of our priorities and our focus in the budget, three key priorities, and we tried to keep the budget really, really focused on these. Number one, exactly as we heard from Fortis, affordability. Affordability is a real challenge for a lot of Canadians, especially the most vulnerable. And so we've put forward some measures to help people with affordability. Chief among them, the grocery rebate. And this is going to provide up to $467 to a family of 4 as a one-off payment, just to help people with those affordability challenges. And I want to say, off the top, I recognize that for a family here in Surrey that is struggling with affordability, that feels kind of sticker shock when they're at the grocery store, $467 is not going to cover everything. It's not going to be like a magic wand. But what I will also say is for that family, $467 will be really welcome. And I'm glad that we're able to provide it. We, and again, I say we because it's us as a country making the choice to do that. Second focus of the budget is reinforcing our healthcare system. And we made the big announcement in February. The Prime Minister made the announcement. $198 billion are going to be spent by us at the federal level supporting our healthcare system. It is a lot of money. As Finance Minister, I have to say, every time I say that $198 billion, I have to kind of go, okay. But I think we all agree that it's the right thing to do. Certainly for me, one of the foundations of Canadian society and the key things about being Canadian is we have a universal, publicly accessible healthcare system. There's no one in Canada who, if they get a horrible diagnosis, that's bad enough, right? Both of my parents have had cancer. It's a terrible thing, that kind of a horrible health situation. But no one in Canada worries, wow, I might lose my house because of it, or my business, might go bankrupt. So that's really, really important, and it does cost money, and we're spending real money to shore it up. And we are also expanding the reach of our healthcare system to include dental care. Already, kids under 12 whose parents make $90,000 or less are covered, and by the end of 2025, everyone in Canada who makes $90,000 or less will be able to get dental care. And I have to say, I'm really glad that we're doing that as a country. I don't know about people here, but I remember as a kid on the school bus, you could tell how much money kids' parents made by the smile of the kid. And that's terrible. And I think it's really, really good that we're going to now be a country where you can't tell the size of someone's paycheck by their smile. And it does really speak to affordability for a lot of people. And then the final area that we're focused on, which I've been spending the morning here in Surrey talking about with my MP friends, is a really big strategic investment in the clean economy. And I didn't organize it for Fortis to be here, but it is a beautiful coincidence because, we're investing, we now have a suite of tax credits underpinned by our price on pollution with some concessional financing on top from the Canada Infrastructure Bank and the Canada Growth Fund, which means we have an $80 billion Made in Canada Clean Economy program. The centerpiece of what we announced on Tuesday is investments in electricity, including now for the first time public utilities will be eligible. BC is in a great position. Something like 98% of your electricity today is clean electricity. But you guys and the whole country, we're going to need to double the amount of clean electricity we generate by 2050. That is a lot of building. And we now have a plan in place, measures in place, incentives in place that are really going to let us do that. And I really want to kind of call on everybody here and say, this is an exciting moment. You know, I think for Canada, this is a moment comparable to the moment when we decided, you know, let's be a country and let's build a railway across the country. Let's decide to build and grow. I think the clean economy opportunity, very much with electricity as its spine, is that kind of a moment for jobs and growth and innovation. And I really believe the federal government now has the tools, the incentives, the investments in place to let Canada succeed and flourish as no other country can. And so I guess I would say, over to you guys. I'm not going to invent the new things. I'm not going to build the new companies. You know, Suk and Randeep, they could be entrepreneurs and be inventing and building the new companies, but they have chosen to serve you and your community. So, you know, our job is to put the incentives, to put the tools in place. I think they're there. Tell me if, you know, you want me to tweak them, and tell Randeep and Suk as you sort of pour over our plan. But I think we can really do it. And I hope you share my optimism and confidence and enthusiasm. And I hope you're going to go get them. Okay.
All right. So we have some questions that we have for you, Minister. And the first one is, Surrey has the greatest number of manufacturers within British Columbia. We need a robust manufacturing sector to drive good quality jobs, not only within British Columbia, but throughout the nation. When it comes to the green infrastructure, the green economy plan that this federal budget has released, what are your thoughts about our competitiveness with other nations, especially as it relates to workforce development for this new economy that we're building together?
I think we are absolutely competitive. I mean, I think that there is, I'll put it like this, guys. Like, I go to meetings of G7 and G20 finance ministers, and when I sit around those tables and we all kind of talk about what we're working on, what's happening in our own countries, there is no seat I would rather be sitting in than the one that says Canadian Minister of Finance. And I'll tell you, the other ministers, and they will sometimes say this, they're like, wow, we would like to have Canada's problems. We are in a really, really great position. And I think the strengths we have are, you know, one, our people. We have the best educated people in the whole OECD. The budget continues to make investments in workforce development, in labor market training agreements with the provinces. Our tax credits for the clean economy include requirements for creating apprentice places. And the budget does include also a real stepping up of support for students. The Canada Student Grant increased by 40% and an increase in student loans. Because I agree, workforce really, really important. I see early learning and childcare actually as part of that workforce support. And I see the healthcare and dental as part of the workforce support. Someone who runs a car parts manufacturer who has operations in Canada and in the US said to me that in her plants, she has a 25% absenteeism rate in the US operations and an 8% absenteeism rate in the Canadian operations. So, you know, I think that from a business, and I can assure you, we recite that statistic all the time when we're trying to attract foreign investment into Canada. But the fact is, our investments in Canadians are actually investments also in business development. Final thing I'll say, I'm glad the first question was on manufacturing. Because from my perspective, probably the single most compelling reason why we needed to put this ambitious clean economy plan into place is manufacturing. I think right now, decisions about capital allocation are being taken today, are being taken this year by global companies and by Canadian companies, which are going to determine where is stuff built that's going to create jobs for the next generation. And we have to get that stuff here in Canada. There really is, this is about deciding, do we want manufacturing, do we want industrial jobs in our country in this century? And I really see, I see the combination that Canada has of people plus manufacturing plus natural resources. That's the Canadian recipe for success. And it's kind of unbeatable because name me another country that has all three of those to the extent that we do.
Surrey has the greatest number of newcomers and refugees that come to our city within the province. And can you speak to how the federal budget is working on housing initiatives for our newcomers?
100%. And look, I think that on the people side of that Canadian equation, people plus resources plus manufacturing, immigration is such a huge part of Canada's people strength. And I do want to take a moment to say, wow, Surrey, you do such a good job at being a place where new Canadians thrive. And that is amazing. And I think we as Canadians need to recognize how remarkable it is that we are a country that welcomes new Canadians so enthusiastically and so effectively. And the reason I say that is, let's not take our strengths for granted. Let's recognize them and invest in them. And this is really something that differentiates Canada, I would say, from every other country in the world. We're living in a time when a lot of countries are becoming ambivalent, to be polite about it, about immigration. Canada is not, and that is great. And PowerTech, where Sukan Randeep and I just were with Premier Eby, to me was an example of the miracle of Canadian immigration. It's like a place that is driven by brilliant engineering talent, and so many people I spoke to there came here from somewhere else with their education, with their drive, and they're so happy to be here. But you ask, Anita, a very important question, which is, if we want to welcome new Canadians, we have to build more homes. We are a growing country, and that means we need to have more places for people to live. We put in place a very ambitious housing plan in the budget last year, $10 billion worth. And a key element, now, it was a multi-year plan. You don't deploy $10 billion in a complicated area like housing in one day. And one of the key parts of that plan was set into motion by the Prime Minister earlier this month, which is the Housing Accelerator. That's $4 billion, and I see Her Worship nodding her head. I'm glad, because I have a pitch to you here, okay? I have a pitch to you and to Surrey. This is $4 billion, and it is basically there to say, we, the federal government, we recognize we are not the boss of everything. We are one level of a Canadian polity that has appropriately different levels of elected government. And each elected official in Canada has just the same democratic legitimacy and authority and responsibility as a federal minister. We're just in charge of different stuff. So much of the housing decisions are quite rightly at the municipal level. And, I think an important part of life actually is recognizing when you don't know everything about everything, and you're not in charge of everything. And we recognize that. I see the mayor smiling. And, you know, I certainly recognize municipalities are the places with the knowledge about housing and are the places where so many of these decisions are made. So what we've done with the Housing Accelerator is we have said there is $4 billion on the table. I think we all agree, I think everyone in this room agrees, Surrey needs to build more housing. I think everyone in all of Canada agrees Canada needs to build more housing. And that $4 billion is there for municipalities across the country to submit applications. The portal is open today. You could leave now and submit your application instead of listening to me. For municipalities to say, give me some of that money and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, which will get more houses built. You tell us how you're going to do it, and if you can convince us that this financial support will help you to build more houses, you can get some of that money. And I see no reason why Surrey's application should not be the first, and why it should not be the best, and why you guys should not get lots of money to help you build a lot more houses, because this is one of the fastest growing communities in Canada.
Let's talk about international trade and supply chain. One of the key challenges that we faced during the pandemic was really realizing that we needed to enhance our supply chain networks. Can you speak to how this budget is leveraging and enhancing supply chain infrastructure, leveraging the free trade agreements that Minister Ng, for example, has negotiated? Here we are really advocating for the implementation of Roberts Bank Terminal 2, other supply chain infrastructure. Can you speak to how this budget is leveraging on that opportunity?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, when I talked about what is the Canadian secret sauce, and I said it is people plus resources plus manufacturing, I was trying to be succinct, but I could have added a fourth, which is geopolitics and our geopolitical position. The fact is that Canada is the only G7 country with trade agreements with every single other G7 country. That's a really big deal. It didn't happen by accident. We worked on it together. And my beloved members of the Trade Committee helped a lot with that, so thanks a lot. And the Foreign Affairs Committee, I really appreciate it. So that is an advantage which we need to lean into. Our clean economy plan is based very much on saying our partners around the world want stuff made in Canada. They have very much recognized, following Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine and the pandemic, that having your supply chain dependent on a dictatorship makes you really vulnerable. And so there is right now really an interest from Asia, from Europe, from the United States, as we heard from President Biden just Friday in Ottawa, to buying stuff from Canada. So let's get making it. Part of that does require generating more clean power. Again, why electricity is one of the key measures in our clean economy plan. We announced in the budget a national supply chain council. So in terms of kind of working out specific kinks in the supply chain, I think that is really, really going to help us. And I think, I had a meeting just before coming here with Premier Eby. We are very committed to, I'm in BC, so let me say working with him and his government specifically on getting the big projects, the big infrastructure projects built that you need to sell your stuff to the rest of the world.
Minister, should we be
I just want to say one more thing about that, just by the way, because I want to ask you guys to help me. And what I mean by that is I think that this is a moment when we in Canada have to kind of adjust our thinking a little bit collectively. And I think we have to recognize we're at this moment where, as a country, as a society, as specific communities, as companies, we do have this historic opportunity. I really believe, this is an industrial transformation comparable only to the Industrial Revolution itself. And so I think we kind of collectively have to decide, do we want to seize it or not? But the reason I say we have to collectively decide it is actually doing that, actually building big things in Canada, actually building more homes, actually expanding our power grid, actually building more mines, actually finishing the LNG terminal, all that kind of stuff. I think we have to be sure as a country we are not only agreeing to do this at the high conceptual level, but we agree to do it in our own communities. And I find as a politician sometimes getting to that final piece, and the mayor is also smiling at me, of actually agreeing to do it in our own communities, that's when sometimes the irritants show up. The federal government is not going to be able to push aside those irritants on our own, nor should we, because Canada is a democracy. So we are really going to have to decide, do we want to build big things in our country? Do we want our country to grow? Do we want our manufacturing base to get bigger? Do we want to expand our power generation capacity? God has given us tons of critical minerals. Do we want to build the mines to extract them? Do we want to build the roads and the power to power those mines? Do we want to build the factories to process them? Now, I think the answer must be yes, and I think we can do it in a better way than the people did who built the railways. I think we can do it in a way that respects the environment. We can do it in a way that respects the rights of Indigenous people, which we sure didn't do our last big nation-building push. But, it is going to mean some disruption. And all of us have to make the choice that that's what we want as a country. So that's the direction I think we need to go. We have made big investments in the budget to help us get there. But I really need every single person in this room, every board of trade across the country, to help me generate and build the social support to actually get there and to actually do this stuff.
Minister, do you think we should be concerned about what's happening in the United States with Silicon Valley Bank? What's your perspective on that?
When you started the sentence and said, we should be concerned about what's happening in the United States, ... I was like, which one of the things? So let me say this. One of the many things one of the many reasons that we really all, I think, should and do feel lucky to be Canadian is we have a stable and resilient financial system. We have financial institutions which are very well regulated, which are very well capitalized, and a financial culture which is very careful about risk. And so, look, as Canadians, I think we're actually a very cosmopolitan and internationally oriented society. I think Canadians are very well informed about what's happening in the world, perhaps particularly well informed about what's happening in the United States. We have to be. And so I think it's good for people to be aware of what's happening in other countries. I do want people to have real confidence in the stability, the resilience of our financial system. Canada is a country of peace, order, and good government. And, moments like this, when there is volatility in the world, it's kind of good to be the peace, order, and good government country.
Minister, I wanted to ask you about the war in Ukraine, because as I mentioned before, we have the greatest number of newcomers, refugees that come into our city, a variety of newcomer organizations that support our Ukrainian refugees, for example, for productive career pathways. What is the federal government role in terms of and especially within this budget in the context of supporting Ukraine, what is the future of our support for Ukraine?
Okay, that is a great question. Suk and Randeep and I had a very moving personal experience at PowerTech just earlier today. We were going on a tour, and it turned out one of the electrical engineers was a woman I had met before. Her name is Victoria, and she was on the first plane of Ukrainian refugees who landed in Winnipeg. She got here in May, and I met her there. And she said, yeah, you met my daughter and my cat. Both are doing well. Think about that. She is from Mariupol. Horrible. I mean, that has been turned into a hell on earth. That is an occupied city that has been devastated. And then she fled to Irpin, which is in the suburbs of Kyiv, which was also under Russian occupation. And now she's here. And she got here in May, and she has a PhD in electrical engineering. She was a professor, and now she's an electrical engineer in Canada. How lucky we are that she's here. And how great Surrey is that you have welcomed her and her family. And by the way, she said her daughter, Zhenya, loves going to school here. So you guys are doing a great job. Well done, Madam Mayor. About Ukraine more broadly, I'll tell you what Victoria said to me. She said, do not have any doubt, we are going to win. And she just said it that way, not in a kind of triumphant way, but just very, we're going to do it. And you need to know that. And I really believe that. I think the people of Ukraine are being remarkably brave. And I think it's a privilege for us as a country to be able to support them. I really recognize that they're fighting our fight. Those battle lines in Ukraine, it's the battle line between Russia and Ukraine. It's also the battle line between democracy and dictatorship. In the budget, we included $2.4 billion in further financial support for Ukraine, direct financing, because one of the things they're doing is they're still running a country, right? So they're fighting a war, but they need to keep the country going. And one of the things they've done in the liberated territories, one of the first things, I don't know if people remember this, but after they liberated Kherson, President Zelensky went there right afterwards, and he gave a speech in the town square. And one of the first things he announced is he said, and we're going to pay everyone's pension, and we're going to pay your back pensions, the ones you didn't get when you were under Russian occupation. All of that costs money, and so that $2.4 billion from Canada will really make a difference. And I think as Canadians, we should know and we should be proud that among the G7 on a per capita basis, Canada is top of the league in terms of providing direct financial support to Ukraine. And, even as I say we should be proud of ourselves, I think we should, but I also really recognize, I I think this is really a defining battle for the world. We're providing financial support, but the only people who are dying are Ukrainians. So I really, I feel I respect them very, very much. I think we owe them a lot.
Well, we really respect the work that you're engaging in and your support to Ukraine. And my final question to you is really focused on business support. How does this budget really focus on the sustainability for businesses?
Okay, well, many ways. I think a lot of the stuff I talked about has direct relevance to businesses. But let me take the opportunity to mention one other thing that I think for the small businesses in the room will be important, and that is credit card fees. We have an agreement to bring them down by up to 27%. This is going to bring down fees for 90% of small businesses in Canada, and should amount to savings of more than $1 billion. So that is direct support, and I'm very, very glad we're going to be able to support our small businesses. Et je voudrais, pour finir, je voudrais juste dire un grand merci à tout le monde qui est ici. Parce que je suis très, très reconnaissante que ce n'est pas le gouvernement qui créa les emplois. Ce n'est pas le gouvernement qui créa la croissance économique. Ce n'est pas le gouvernement qui créa une société accueillante pour les immigrants comme les Ukrainiennes, mais comme beaucoup de monde ici dans la salle. C'est vous, c'est les entrepreneurs, c'est les chambres de commerce dans tout notre grand et magnifique pays. Alors vraiment, un grand merci à vous. It's really, it really is really inspiring for me to have a chance to meet with you, to talk to you, and really just to say thank you very much for everything you've done. We've been through a heck of a 3 years since COVID first hit, and I really think we can now all see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't want to diminish any of the challenges that people across the country are facing, or individual people in this room. But I do want to conclude by saying I think the future is really, really bright for Canada. And I feel very lucky to be Canadian, and very lucky to do the best job I can serving you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for visiting Surrey, Minister. And everyone, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Fortis BC, our supporting sponsor, the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. And check out all of our upcoming services and programs at businessinsurrey.com. Make it a great business day, and thank you again. A great Surrey applause for the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada.